What health risks do you face as an athlete when you're competing in extreme sports? Why are medical checkups important before a race? And how can you prepare your body for extreme sports? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Dr. Mousamtombene, and signing with us today is Trifosa Ntsoelengwe. On Vital Signs, we'll focus on health risks of extreme sports. Coming up in the program, we'll speak to a mountain biker who escaped death. We'll also speak to a sports physician about the health risks of participating in extreme sports and the importance of training and preparing your body for these sports. We'll then speak to a mountaineer who became the first black man to summit Mount Everest. And lastly, we'll speak to Comrades Marathon race director about the process of entering this ultra marathon. Remember that you can be part of the show by asking the guests that we'll have on any question that you may have on your mind by assembling your view with what we're discussing today. The number to call is 011-714-0677 or 011-714-0678. We want to hear from you. You can also share your thoughts with us on social media, Twitter at SABC Vital Signs or Facebook SABC Vital Signs. The show continues after this ad break. Welcome back to Vital Signs. I'm Dr. Mousamtombene, and today focus endabeni extreme sports. Na yonke into ofana kuyenza empilweni yakho mangabe wena uzibona umuntu ofit ofuna ukwenza lezi zinto nokuthi ke ungaguli kakhulu ke masowenza leso sport. Now, Mike Roy is a mountain bike rider, and of course he escaped death after participating in one of South Africa's most physically and mentally demanding adventure challenges known as the Race Across South Africa, which requires riders to travel by bike and even hike carrying their bikes a distance of, wait for it, 2,150 kilometers. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Absolute pleasure.
So the first question I'm sure that's on everyone's mind is, why would you even want to do this to yourself? 2,000-kilometer ride? What inspires you to get into this?
I think it's a natural progression of those of us that enjoy endurance sports. I'm 60 now. When I was young, I played rugby, and then things like the Comrades Marathon, the Doozy Canoe Marathon. That was part of my 20s and 30s. And then mountain biking came along. And you got a whole lot of races, I need to see and things like that. And yeah, it's the next challenge. And it's been going for about 20 years now.
Sure.
In fact, next year will be the 20th anniversary, so been around.
So, I mean, this idea of sport and it sort of accumulating in terms of people that just want to be fit or enjoy the exercise or enjoy just being fit builds up in the way that you've naturally described. In school, a lot of people participate in some sort of sport. And over the years, you end up going outside of the norm. Like you've mentioned, you've done the canoe races, you've done the ultra marathons and things such as that. What do you physically need to have to participate in those sports?
Well, you know, I guess a lifetime of doing that kind of thing helps. That doesn't mean to say that somebody can't start at any stage in life in doing this sort of thing. But it just accumulates, and I'm an average guy. I'm no great professional athlete. You know, if you've got the front end of the field and you've got the middle and then you've got the end of the bell curve on the left-hand side, that's where I fit. But there's a place for everyone. Like in Comrades, you've got a 12-hour cutoff. You've got the chaps winning in 6 hours, 6.5 hours. But everyone gets their medal, and you feel good, you feel alive.
So
that's why we do it.
Let me talk to you about this Comrades experience before we get into the race, you know, across South Africa. That must have been something that you naturally, like you say, fell into, but training for a 90-kilometer run isn't something that the ordinary guy could do. I mean, you described yourself as being a very ordinary guy, but I doubt a lot of people would want to participate in a race like that. What made you participate?
Yeah, I first ran as a young guy. Why did I do it? My girlfriend was a runner, and I probably did it to impress her. It's always that. And I was playing a lot of rugby at the time, and it kept me nice and fit. And yeah, it's a great challenge. You get up on a Saturday morning and in Johannesburg or the Gauteng you've used to and maybe still have. You've got a choice of a race on a Saturday morning here, or in fact in Pretoria, or one in Johannesburg on Sunday. So it's regular event, and you're getting up early, you're starting your weekend, you're feeling good. and you keep in shape. You know, it's.
So race across South Africa then becomes another thing that you want to go collect a badge for. Tell us about the race across South Africa. What inspired you to get into it? And what did you physically have to do to participate in such a race?
Well, what did I physically have to do was way more than what I actually did. But I'll get on to that. What inspired me, I was going through a bit of a tough time in my life at 2009, and I was a canoeist at that stage. And my partner, a chap called Kevin Davey, he's in the front of the canoe, I'm in the back. He said, I know what you need. There's this little race across South Africa on a bicycle. I think that'll give you some direction. So I was like, okay. And next thing I knew it, in 2009, there I was on my bike, lining up in Maritzburg, not a clue as to what lay ahead of me.
Jeez.
And what lay ahead of me was a very, very difficult, extreme endurance event. And yeah, you know, once I did it, or tried to do it, I was a bit out of my depth on that particular event. It became part of my life, as it has for many other people who've been lucky enough to be part of this magnificent event.
Were there criteria or things that you needed to meet before you got into that race?
You know, like for Comrades, you've got to run a marathon in a certain time, a qualifying race. There's nothing like that in Freedom Challenge. It's up to you. You want to enter. There are some forms you sign. You know, I promise not to hold the race organized liable for anything.
Yes.
But you'd be mad to enter the event if you at least didn't have some belief in your ability to endure, because that's what it's about. You've got 26 days to finish the race. The winners do it in about 10.
Sure.
And you're under physical and probably of more importance, mental stress the entire time. And it's like a little microcosm of life. You're faced with daily challenges. Sure. And you're tested. And that feels good, especially when you're an old guy like me. I'm 60 now, to see whether you've still got it, I suppose. And it feels good until maybe you realize you've once pushed one's boundaries a bit far.
Slightly too far. So, I mean, that's my next question.
Yeah.
This idea that, you know, it feels good, but there are times within the race where things probably didn't feel that good.
No.
The pain, the aches, the, I guess, sleeplessness, the sort of endurance and stamina that's being tested on a daily. Did you have any injuries? Did you find yourself lacking in some areas?
Yeah, I hadn't trained enough. You know, I'm obviously a bigger guy, and I've, as I said, I've run. I know I can do the doozies and the Comrades, and I can endure, but I probably never really paid attention to the training because it just kind of happened. Bulletproof. We all think we're bulletproof.
For sure, yeah.
And the older you get, I promise you, the less the less bulletproof you are. So I went into the 2009 event absolutely underprepared, physically. Mentally, I just went and I carried a bird book, Sasol bird book and a pair of binoculars. I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to tour across South Africa and look at some nice birds. And, oh my God, that bird book sat at the first, still sits to this day at that support station.
I'm surprised you didn't leave it along the way.
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did after the first day. But, you know, you ask what prices I paid. You know, you've asked me to come in and chat here about what happened, my cardiac kind of instances. And, you know, at the end of the 2009 race, 6 months after that, I had my first heart attack.
Sure.
Supposedly learned my lesson, but probably didn't in terms of regular training and watching my diet. 2015, I entered again for the Freedom Challenge race across South Africa. And I was definitely better prepared.
Yeah.
But during the race, it didn't get easier. And it's a kind of event you can ride yourself into fitness. And 4 days after the event, I had my second heart attack.
Sure.
And I've paid the price for that for the last 7 years. I suffer from an arrhythmia, and we're not going to sort that out. So, you know, if there's a message to get across to whoever's watching this, you know, just make sure you go in prepared. You've seen if you've noticed certain signs of perhaps cardiac stress.
Yeah.
Go and have it checked out, and yeah.
For sure. Well, Mike, Crazy, crazy story. I think a lot of people that would want to participate in endurance sports, especially the last bit about, all the effects and all the problems that may come with being such an extreme sportsman, I guess, and the big issues that come with that. I think they'll take a note from this and walk away from it with that knowledge. But good luck for the future. You do not look like a man that wants to stop doing all those crazy things.
I don't. I still do it.
Let's do a little bit less and look after our hearts. But, of course, that was Mike Roy, a mountain biker. And, of course, after the break, we'll speak to sports physician, and that is Dr. Mamasilo Lechaba, about the health risks of participating in extreme sports. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vital Signs. Now, some athletes are unaware of the risks of participating in an extreme sports, while others understand the danger that they choose to push their bodies to the limit for. Now, endurance sports and, of course, recreational activities present an innate risk of serious morbidity and mortality. We are now joined by sports physician Dr. Mamasilo Lechaba, and we're discussing the health risks of participating in extreme sports. Thank you so much for joining us, Doc. I see you're very busy, looking like you're doing physical examinations there, but let's have a chat around what extreme sports is and what you physically need to be ready for as an athlete who may want to participate in the sport. So what is extreme sports? What's your definition?
Okay, so I think the best way to look at extreme sport is to define what is extreme. So extreme can be in different levels. The first level of extreme could be the volume. So volume means how much you are doing. So if you are doing a lot or too much, then that will be extreme. The second way of trying to define what extreme is looking at the intensity. And intensity means how hard you are doing. So you can be doing short in terms of time or short in terms of distance, but you can be doing very hard, in which case it can still be extreme in relation to the body. And then the last thing you want to look at in terms of extreme is the environment. So the environment will mean what you are doing against. So anything, whether it's the surface or it's the climate or it's the weather or it's the altitude, so that will be the environment. So these three criteria, your volume, your intensity, and the environment against which you are exercising hard, will then define how extreme is extreme.
Now, should everyone want to or aim to achieve the status of an elite extreme, sports person with respect to training? Now, a lot of people, will speak to this idea of they wake up in the morning and they jog for fitness, but in the same breath, there are people that wake up and go run the Comrades Marathon after obviously, meeting all the qualifying criteria. So what is healthy and what is putting your body too much under too much strain?
That is very relative. It is highly, highly, highly relative. And what I mean relative, it depends on two things. Like any illness or any injury or any situation in medicine, it's always an interplay between the person, the body, the strength of the body, and the environment. So what is extreme to you may not necessarily be extreme to somebody who's an elite athlete. So extreme is very relative. And what will define what extreme is will be based on the criteria I defined earlier, but also it will be based on what you are able to do and what you have been able to do before and what you are trained to do. So if you jog 10 minutes every morning, you're different from somebody who runs marathons and who prepares and trains well. So that is very relative.
Now, we've spoken to this idea of extreme and we've looked at the criteria, but what are some of the common extreme sports where you would need to be elite to participate?
Okay, you've mentioned Comrades. That's the common one. We have another form of sport called triathlon.
Okay.
Triathlon is also an example of extreme sport. It's a combination of running and swimming and cycling, but the distances are quite extreme, if I may use your terminology. Then you can think of mountain climbing, where it's not just an ordinary hike like we all do, but going up these very, very high mountains like Kilimanjaro, Everest, those would be examples of official extreme sports.
Now, looking at the examples that we've just brought up, this idea of a marathon or ultra marathons, and then of course, mountaineering. So all these people that go up all these mountains, what common injuries do these people end up having, to face as they participate in the sport?
Okay, obviously injuries, the risk to injury will depend on what is being done in the sport. For instance, if you are running, your level of risk will not be the same as somebody who's swimming. So the way we approach risk, we look at three things. Three main systems will be affected when you are exercising or partaking in physical activity. We will have the musculoskeletal system, which are your bones and your muscles and your ligaments. Then we will have what we call the cardiorespiratory system, which is really your gearbox and your engine. And then we will have the brain. Unfortunately, even if the brain is not directly related to the sport or it's not touched in the sport, but the brain is the central governor to exercising. So it gets affected as well. So those are the three main systems. And as to which system you will affect to what extent will depend on what sport you are doing and what you do in the sport. But ultimately, why I mentioned these three systems is because regardless of what you are doing, they will ultimately be affected. I'll make an example with your cardiorespiratory system. If you're going to engage in extreme sport, it means your cardiorespiratory demands are very high, regardless of what you're doing. So it will, to a certain extent, affect your cardiorespiratory system. And if you look at concepts like overtraining and all that, if you, regardless of which part of your body you are using to use that exercise, you will find that when you do get to the critical stage of your health, your brain or your psychology or your mental state will always be affected, regardless of which part of the body you use to partake in that exercise. So those are the three main systems that you will affect with these extreme sports.
Now, should participants in all these sports, whether extreme or not, go for pre-participation screening? Now, I know it sounds a little bit off, this idea that if I want to start jogging, I must go see a cardiologist and see a pulmonologist and all these people. But should we participate in some sort of screening to make sure that we don't have any risk factors that may actually have bad effects on us when we do take on the sport?
That's what I would recommend. It's a bit of a biased question because obviously that's my industry, but I would recommend it from a doctor's point of view, not only with people who are planning to go and participate in sport, but I generally, even in general practice, I encourage all people, especially from the age of 35, to at least once in 12 months or once in 6 months to go and visit their family doctor. Especially because nowadays we are burdened with what we call diseases of lifestyle. And if you look at most of them, they are silent killers in the sense that they don't necessarily cause you pain. Or at the stage that they do cause you pain, they are well advanced. And you'll see that most of them, they are in numbers. It's really a game of numbers. And when you are a patient, because you don't feel pain, you will not realize that there is something wrong. And you actually need to go to the doctor for the doctor to look for those numbers. I'll make an example. The commonest disease of lifestyle in South Africa is hypertension. And usually hypertension is a silent killer in the sense that even if your blood pressure is high, you don't feel any pain. Some patients may get dizzy, some may get a headache, but most of the time, you'll realize when the nurse or the doctor or the paramedic or any healthcare worker actually pumps your arm to see that your blood pressure is not in order. So then if you didn't go there to seek that medical review, then you would not know. And some people only know at the time when they already suffer a major incident that they've had a problem. And then when we do the relevant test, we find that no, this problem is not from yesterday. This problem has been long-standing, but the person was not aware of it. So it's a long way to say to you, I would recommend highly that anybody, whether elite athlete, whether extreme or recreational sport, should go and have a proper medical checkup, just so that they know what their risk is. But not just for physical activity or for exercise, everybody in life. Because remember, physical activity and exercise is a very relative thing. I mean, when you walk up the stairs, is that it's not officially exercise or sport, but it is physical activity. So you may not be involved in sport, but if you have a risk factor, you may be trying to go upstairs or trying to run for a bus that is going without you, and then voila. So you cannot avoid physical activity in life. So I would recommend that, especially from the age of 35, and you will ask me why 35, youth stops at 35, and we know that the risk to disease and death increases with age as you grow older.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be 35. It's not a law. It's just my cutoff, because that's where youth stops. And that's when you start getting exponential risk towards these illnesses. Rightfully, anybody has the right to go and have a checkup at any time. But I tend to be more mandatory with people from the age of 35 going on.
Look, we'll continue this discussion. Of course, we're talking about getting your body ready for all the physical strain that comes with you wanting to participate in either lead sports, extreme sports, or the run-of-the-mill jog around the block, making sure that you're healthy. And of course, that is Dr. Dichaba, and we'll continue a discussion with her a little bit later on. After the break, we'll speak to a mountaineer. Yes, someone that climbs mountain because they like it. And of course, this is Vital Science. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Vital Science. Now, Mount Everest is a great mountaineering expedition that is on the bucket list of many climbers. However, climbing of this mountain has many challenges and, of course, risk factors that come with it. Extreme weather being one of the major challenges of this journey. Now, Mr. Sibusiso Villani became the first black man to summit Mount Everest in 2003, and he's here to share his journey with us. Bab, Ninja.
Hi, siyaphila njani?
Hi, siyaphila. Hi, mangubhekile ngiyabona ngila baba fit. So
I have to be.
You have to be, right? Yeah. And the idea and the reason why we're having today's show is highlighting why it's so important to be fit enough to take on the challenges that we'd like to take on. What made you want to go climb almost 9 kilometers up into the upper mountain?
Well, it's a very interesting way of putting it, but I would like to say that up until the age of 26, I'd never camped, meaning sleeping in a tent.
Sure.
I'd never hiked, and that is to say I was never a mountain climbing aspiring kid growing up in rural South Africa. But one day, having accepted to take a friend on a hike, he made a comment and a question that followed, and I couldn't resist. The comment was, "You climb with such ease, and I've been watching you today, and it's a talent, but it makes me wonder why there are not that many black people who climb mountains." So as a kid who's growing up in Africa, I thought, but why would you want to climb mountains?
Right.
And I said to him, it's a sport that we really don't understand, and hence why. So then the next comment was, if you had the means to climb Everest, would you do it? It didn't say, would you think about climbing other mountains or anything? So feeling embarrassed to say no, I said, absolutely. And when I said that, I had no idea how tall Mount Everest was. You mentioned it's 8,848 meters. I had no clue. But it was just that question, would you do it? And I didn't want to say no. And I think when I said yes, that was the day I summited Everest. So that was the prompting, the question and the comment.
The question, the comment, and of course, all the physical work that goes into all of this. But I'm pretty sure the next day you didn't go climb up Mount Everest. It came about with many things in between. Let's talk about the training to get to that point. What did you have to do?
Well, it depends on how you start. If you're starting as a person who has always been aspiring to climb mountains, so you obviously have a program which might last years. And I didn't. When my friend asked me the question, we sort of thought, it's a wild idea, and it wasn't going to happen. So when I met him, when I was 26 years old, it took us up until when I was 33 years old for him to say to me, I found a company that organizes these expeditions. And by that time, I'd forgotten about our discussion, so I never thought it was going to happen. So he writes to me and he says, because he was in England, he says to me, I found a company that organizes the expeditions. We once spoke about it and you said you would do it. Do you still want to do it? And when I looked at the timing, I only had less than a year to do it, to train for it. So, but luckily I've been very athletic from when I was a child. I've been running. So physically, I knew that I could do it. I believed I could do it. I think that's the start. You've got to believe in yourself. That you can do those things. So I wrote to him and I said, absolutely, I'd like to do it. So the training from when we decided I was going to go, it only was a trip to the Himalayas, which was only 24 days, and we climbed 2 mountains, all of which we summited. Then I got back and I thought I'd acquired all the skills and all that was needed for me to go to Everest, and I did. So ideally, that's what I did. That's how I trained. But I wouldn't say you go that route. That is a SABC Villani route.
It sounds very shortcutty.
It does.
I won't
It
even
does.
lie, because I'm pretty sure I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, no, it does, and it is very critically important for people to really train and very adequately. And it is a physical torment, it is a mental torment, it is a cardio challenge. So you've got to make sure that your training program involves all of those. But the biggest fitness you need is personal assessment. Are you physically fit and physically healthy to do it? If you believe and think you are, like I did, then you decide to go.
Surely it feels a lot different for the people that have climbed. You know, you speak to this physical toil, but when I say to my friends, let's go hiking this weekend and we'll climb up this 200-meter high mountain and then come down and we don't feel out of breath at the end of it, surely it doesn't feel the same. So take us through the physical pain, for instance, for someone that we're seeing on the screen now, that they actually going through on a daily.
So when you arrive at the base of Mount Everest, which is almost Africa's highest, which is Kilimanjaro, because base camp is at 5,300 meters. That's the base of this mountain, which have taken you 10 days. Every time you get up in the morning and try and walk, you run out of breath. You can't breathe. So when you get to base camp, you are even more oxygen deprived, which means your body is suffering even more strain. So it becomes a long slog. For you to walk from here to about 5 meters, you stop a number of times to be able to recuperate and breathe. Then that informs the fact that higher than that, it gets even worse. So it is such torture and torment. So the preparation to get to the summit, when you get to the summit, is a very frustrating scenario where you climb up a little bit, you come down, you climb up more, and then you come down to the base camp all the time. You go up, you do 3 of these, we call them rotations. Okay. Just to allow your body to adapt to the altitude. Once you've achieved that, which is about a month, then you just go for the summit attempt. The summit attempt, you start at 8,000 meters. When you get to 8,000 meters, it is known as the death zone. This is a place where there's no life. There's so little oxygen that every minute you are there, you're living death. And that is what you contend with. But as soon as you walk out of your tent, you just take 1 step and you stop. 1 step and you stop. You can hardly walk 100 meters without having stopped, maybe 10 times, having to recuperate. It can never be articulated in words as to how much it takes to summit that mountain or climb that mountain. That's where your physical preparedness and preparation and training and your mental strength has to play a role in there. Otherwise, that's when you pack your bags and go home.
Sure. Mr. Villani, look, I thought maybe one of these days I'll take on this challenge, but it sounds like I will not succeed, because
No, you definitely
to
will.
take a breath every minute to stop and breathe is something that seems quite strenuous. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think there's so many people that want to climb, have an interest in climbing, and listening and hearing you speak will sort of re-challenge them to look at their physical strain that their bodies could potentially get, but also look at them and ask those assessment questions. Am I ready for this? Can I do this? And of course, I need to get physically fit to do all these sort of things. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Lovely,
indeed.
lovely. Now, mental and physical strength play a big role in a lot of extreme sports. However, preparation for participation in these essentials sports, of course, is needed when engaging this extreme sport. Now, we continue our discussion with sports physician Dr. Mamasilo Dichaba to discuss the importance of training and preparing your body for these extreme sports. Now, Doc, I see you're back. Let's chat around this idea of preparation. So I'd like to use the example, for instance, of an ultra marathon, and then maybe let's look at mountaineering as one of those things. How would you physically get your body ready to attempt these extreme sports?
I think before I start, just allow me to clap hands for the gentleman that you've just interviewed now. It's the kind of thing that fills me with awe. I mean, I've been doing this job since 1999. I've come across a lot of elite athletes. I'm not an athlete myself, though I'm in this industry. It fills me with awe what these extreme sport athletes can do. So allow me to clap hands for him. Let's talk about preparation. Anything in life, even for you to be in the job that you are in, even for us to be in this interview, you need to prepare. And your success is based on how well you prepare. It's very unfortunate, but you have to prepare and you have to prepare well. And preparation will involve primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention of problems. So primary prevention is when you make sure that the body is well conditioned, it is well nourished, and it is well rested to take up the challenge. Then secondary prevention is when you start intervening when the problems have already happened. So in your preparation, you must be ready for all that. So with athletes, you have to prepare before they even start participating, which is what we were talking about, which is the pre-participation health screening. It is in this pre-participation health screening that you will then be exposed to what the risk factors are, because you cannot manage something you haven't measured or you are not aware of. So you need to know what you are dealing with. Then based on what your pre-participation health screening will tell you, then you know what you have to deal with insofar as the athletes are concerned. Then you will come up with that in terms of training and getting ready, but you should also, at the time of the event, you should also have mitigation in case of problems, because you know that no matter how well prepared you can be, there will always be issues and there will always be tragedy. So you should make sure that then, no matter how fit your athletes are, no matter how well trained they are, at the time or at the place of the participation, you should be ready for any eventuality. And your readiness for those eventuality is also dependent on how well you prepare. So not only do the athletes prepare and train, but the people who look after the athletes as well should prepare, because they are part of the athlete, because they offer the support system of the athletes. And the reason why I'm taking it at this angle is because everybody knows that if you are going to engage in a sporting event, you will prepare, you will train. But there is that aspect that is overlooked, that not only is the athlete preparing in terms of training and getting ready, but the support system of the athlete should also prepare and be ready. Because no matter how hard the athlete prepares, you are just as strong as your support system. So while my athletes are training, I'm also preparing and getting ready to make sure that in case of any trouble, I am there and I'm ready to assist.
What does a support system look like for the everyday person? So I get it for extreme sports athletes. These are people that would participate in these events that happen all the time. But for the run-of-the-day recreational runner or recreational biker, what does that support system look like?
Okay, perhaps in order for us to define the support system, let us redefine the requirements.
Okay.
The first requirement, and I will be a little bit controversial in the sense that I'll talk about the things that are not talked about. The first thing I want to emphasize for people who are going to participate in physical activity is rest. I always say to my patients, resting is like taking a car to service. Because even if you buy a 5 million Ferrari with the best engine in town, if you don't service it, it will give up on you. And the body grows and heals while you sleep. So you have to make sure that you rest properly. The second thing is nutrition. Nutrition is like the petrol. You can still have that 5 million Ferrari engine, but if you don't put some decent fuel in it, nothing will happen. So nutrition is the second thing. So if you take care of your rest and you take care of your nutrition, you are already on the right step. The other thing I want to emphasize now at the mental level is patience. You have to be patient when you and involve yourself in physical activity. And what I mean by patient is that you have to be gradual and take your time. I don't know if you heard when Mr. Villani said that They go up, they come down. They go up, they come down. And that takes a month for you to adapt. It can be very tedious. Therefore, it is very important to psychologically prepare your athlete to have patience. It is when people just jump out of things that they then expose themselves to illnesses and to injury. The body is a creature of habit, and the body likes habit. It likes routine. So you need to switch it on. You need to take it slowly through the paces. At every stage, let the body get used to the challenge. Let the body get used to the challenge. Let the body get used to the challenge. And if you do that, no matter how weak, if I may use that word, an individual is, and no matter how extreme and difficult the challenge is, you will achieve. But you just have to take it baby steps, one step at a time. So that is the message I would give to the general people out there. You have to rest well, you have to eat well, and you have to train well. And you have to be very patient. You need to let the body adapt to the strain. Because remember, physical activity is a strain, especially when you are not used to it. So you need to allow the body to get into the strain slowly but surely and get used to it.
Now, this idea of overtraining is a big one, and I think it comes on the back of what you said, where rest is such an important element. But if you're training towards something, that's naturally difficult because you feel as if you need to push yourself to a point where you might be ready to take on this challenge. So what does overtraining look like, and what are the complications of overtraining?
Okay, so what is overtraining? I want to define it differently. Overtraining is not doing too much, or it's not extreme. Overtraining is when you do not allow yourself to go through the processes that I've just defined. You could be doing a non-extreme sport, but you can still overtrain. So it is not so much meaning that you are going to extreme sport. It is more the technique and the way you practice and you train for your sport. And overtraining, simply put, is where you do not allow yourself enough time to recuperate. Hence, when I started with rest and I started with nutrition. Because physical activity is a strain to the body. So after involving yourself in the physical activity, you need to allow the body to recuperate. And the body will recuperate by you resting it and by you feeding it. So it is that Ferrari car of yours that you are driving at 250 to 300 kilometers per hour. God forbid the cops don't catch you. But remember, when it's due time, you still need to take it to service. You need to get out of it and give it about a day or two to go to service. And you still need to stop at the filling station and put fuel. So it is when you are not allowing that moment to rest that then the body is not coming back. You are not recovering. You are just perpetually hitting the body hard and hitting it hard and hitting it hard until the body cannot take it anymore. So even if you engage in extreme sport, if you train properly and you allow yourself proper rest and proper nutrition and proper mental recovery, you will not suffer from overtraining. I don't know if I explain it properly.
No,
it's almost as the misnomer is like when you do extreme sport, then you are overtraining. No, the concept of overtraining is training too much and not allowing for the body to recuperate. So you don't necessarily have to be engaging in extreme sport. Even normal sport, if you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it and just piling up, you're not giving yourself the opportunity for the body to recover. You'll end up with the overtraining syndrome.
The importance of recovery, another point highlighted by Dr. Dichaba. Thank you so much for joining us. That, of course, being Dr. Mamasilo Dichaba, who is a sports physician. After the break, we speak to the Comrades Marathon race director about this ultra marathon. See you after this. back to Vital Signs. Now, the 90-kilometer Comrades Marathon made its return in August following a 2-year break enforced by COVID-19. However, the race made headlines when 2 runners lost their lives before reaching the finish line. Joining us is the Comrades Marathon race director, Rowan James, to speak about the processes of entering an ultra marathon. Thank you so much for joining us, Rowan. Let's chat around this year's Comrades Marathon. Back after a 2-year hiatus, how did that feel from an organizational perspective?
Good morning. Yes, it was really fantastic to have the race back after a 2-year break. The overwhelming comments from the runners out there is that they were tired of virtual races. And they wanted to get back to doing the real deal, and that's what we were able to do and present this year.
Now, people being tired of virtual races and wanting the real thing definitely came about with the race coming back to its fully fledged kilometer capacity and people partaking in this year's activity. But training for this obviously requires a lot. Do you as an organization have a number of criteria that you require people that want to participate in the race to have?
Yes, so we work very closely with the various running clubs around the country, because ultimately the running clubs around the country are the backbone of the sport. So within many of the clubs, they have their own various dedicated coaches that assist fellow club members who would like to run the race. We as the event organizers have what's known as the official Comrades coach, which is a gentleman by the name of Lindsay Perry. And he writes various programs that are available on the website dependent on what sort of time the runner wants to go for.
What do these programs include, and what does that look like for a potential runner?
So the programs are quite extensive from the point of view is in terms of what a runner wants to do or try and achieve. So it would include a combination of hill work or mountain work, if you want to call it that, speed work, as well as LSD, long, slow distance training.
So let's talk about what athlete, I guess, someone like me who would want to participate in a marathon, what does that criteria look like for me? So what do I have to do in terms of the boxes that I need to tick in order to participate in the Comrades Marathon?
So for anybody to participate in the Comrades Marathon, there's effectively, I'm going to call it a menu of 5 items that need to be completed in no particular order. Number 1, they need to be a member of a running club that's registered with their provincial federation and in the national federation, being Athletics South Africa. Number 2, they need to have a license number. So when you join a club, you get given a license number. Number 3, they need to run a qualifying race, and I'm sure we'll chat a bit about that as we go along. A qualifying race being a minimum of a standard marathon of 42 kilometers. Number 4, they need to complete the extensive medical questionnaire that we put out as part of the entry process as well.
So let's talk about the 2 points that you've just highlighted. The one being the medical questionnaire and all the questions that are asked there. And then secondly, this requirement for a marathon. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So just in terms of the medical questionnaire, it's quite a detailed questionnaire, roughly 72 questions in total, but dependent on how you answer the questionnaire, that then unpacks or unfolds the questions accordingly. So for argument's sake, if you've got no major ailments or anything that you're aware of, then naturally there won't be 72 questions. If there are, then unpacked subsections up to a total of 72 questions. We have done this in tandem with the Sport, Exercise, Medicine and Lifestyle Institute, commonly known as Assembly, which is based at the University of Pretoria. And we work extensively with them in terms of putting this questionnaire together and sending it out to the runners. They then collate all the information that is supplied by the runners. And from that, the program or system that they work then flags the runners as either a red, yellow, green, depending on how they've answered. And then what it does is it gives them an opportunity to interact directly with the athlete, particularly the ones that are flagged as red or orange, stroke yellow.
So are there medical requirements that disqualify one? Now, I know you've said that there's a yellow, there's a green, and of course the red flags that you'd flag athletes for. But what criteria disqualifies one from participating in the marathon?
We as event organisers, as long as you've met those qualifying requirements or criteria, in other words, being able to run a standard marathon in under 4 hours and 50 minutes, we as event organizers cannot actually disqualify any person from participating in the race as long as they have met the criteria. What we can do is that we can certainly, in tandem with Assembly, encourage them not to start the race if there's any potential flag that have been raised by the Assembly based on the medical question there. So, as I mentioned, we don't have the actual right to be able to disqualify an athlete.
Are there medical tests that are done on the runners before the race, or is that left to provincial level or the runner themselves?
That's left to the runners themselves. Comrades has just over 15,000 entries this year as well, so it would just be practically impossible for the event organisers to do that in the 3 days leading up to the race, where all the runners have to register. So, as part of the entry process, runners need to sign and accept a very comprehensive waiver that, amongst other things, stipulates that the athlete is medically fit to take on this endurance event and properly trained to do so.
Now, this event is obviously quite strenuous, with it being called an ultra marathon, and of course a number of kilometers that the runners eventually have to run. And of course this will have a lot of ailments along the way with respect to the runners. A lot of people cramping, a lot of people having pain and things such as that. From the organization's perspective, in terms of medical care along the route for everyone involved in the race, what do you have to support them?
So just before I get to the route, just in terms of our medical plan, we have an extensive and comprehensive medical plan. And in fact, the end hospital or medical facility at the end of the race is actually known as the biggest temporary medical facility outside of a conflict or war zone or disaster zone. We have 185 beds in the medical facility at the finish. But I digress. Let me just, in terms of what's on the route, we work very closely with our medical partner and sponsor, Netcare 911. Who have 16 ambulances strategically placed along the route, 4 rapid response cars, 5 rapid response motorbikes. The air ambulance helicopter is on standby, and then they have a full VOC venue operations center. We're working from the finished facility as well, where all calls that come in from the route of any runner in medical distress is then channeled through the VOC, and then they in turn dispatch the required rapid response paramedic or ambulance based on where the incident takes place on the route. So everything is plotted and charted on an electronic route map, so to speak, which is immediately available and in the VOC, the Venue Operations Center, and which then ensures that if an emergency does come in from out on the route, we pinpoint accurately where it's from, the call, and then which appropriate facilities, or be it an ambulance or paramedic, to dispatch. And what that also ensures is that, for argument's sake, if you have a case happening out on the route, that we don't go and send 6 ambulances and 8 paramedics there as well. So a very extensive plan that works very well.
Now, this year, 2 runners unfortunately faced catastrophe in the race. What could have been done to make sure that issues like this are addressed with expediency, but importantly, to make sure this doesn't happen in the future?
Look, I think first and foremost, it's very unfortunate that 2 runners have passed on. The last time that happened in the race was in 2012, so we've gone 10 years without it happening. It's never a pleasant scenario within the race, just in terms of what could have been done better. Just in terms of the medical response, rapid getting to the athletes. The report that we have from Netcare is that the athlete that was in distress in Changa, the paramedic was there within 3 minutes, and then the athlete that was in distress in the Westville Pinetown area was actually taken from the route by spectators to a medical facility. Bearing in mind that it's very difficult as well in terms of the road and the congestion on it, with all the athletes on it as well. Hence the reason of strategically placing the medical facilities along the way. It's very difficult to determine what actually was the cause of death of these 2 athletes. Post-mortems currently have been done. I don't have the results as yet. Very difficult to say in terms of the medical questionnaire that we have done, the screening process that all athletes have to do. These two athletes were not actually flagged as red case athletes as well. So it could be any sort of underlying condition that came to the fore on the day. But I'm not a medical doctor, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that or even speculate on that.
Well, thank you so much, Rowan, for informing us on, of course, the events that took place during the Comrades Marathon, but of course, all the criteria that is necessary and all the things that need to be done if you would like to participate. I'm sure they'll be back again next year, so get ready, start qualifying for those marathons so you can also term yourself one of those elite athletes. Thank you so much to all the guests for participating in today's show, and thank you for watching Vital Signs. I'm Dr. Mosam Tomene. See you again soon.